Hey, it's Soul with another video. Who or what is Elune? There are a lot of theories. I've read them, I've watched them, and the other day I finally sat down and just thought for a while, what is this Elune thing? And what is its relationship with Azeroth, the Titans, and the Great Dark itself? Is Elune a Titan? A Void Lord that betrayed its kind? Is it the opposite, a Light Lord, or could it be something even greater? I'm going to share my thoughts with you today because I believe I have a possible answer. And the answer will blow your mind in a most disappointing way because it's not nearly as exciting as some of the popular theories might suggest. This is purely a video of fun and speculation based on information we have in-game and in the Warcraft Chronicles books. And I'm going to connect a lot of dots, so put on those tinfoil hats because it's going to get pretty out there. I'm going to challenge belief, and like it or not, I'm going to do my best to make you as much of a skeptic as a believer in the true identity of one of Warcraft's most mysterious deities. Again, I'm speculating, so lighten up. Elune, according to the Night Elves, aka the Kaldorei, is a goddess whose benevolence helped their civilization thrive some 15,000 years ago. Elune isn't just a deity, it's done actual stuff to answer the call of its most fervent believers, the Sisters of Elune. The Tauren also worshipped Elune but under a different name, as Musha, or is it Musha, the left eye of the Great Earth Mother. Elune doesn't show itself directly, even though the Night Elves shaped it to be a female of their kind because of course they personify their goddess in their image. Its most accurate symbol is represented by the White Lady, Azeroth's larger second moon. Let's cover a few examples of what Elune has done in Warcraft's history because that's the best way to explain what Elune is, and re-examine just how legit some of this information is. Starting with what's most recent, Elune showed its strength as the moon, pulling the spirit of the fallen aspect Ysera and purifying it of corruption before raising it to the stars. Very pretty. There's nothing to debate here. This is Elune's demonstration of power, the ability to cleanse a deep corruption brought by Xavius and the old gods. And this is extremely important to know, that Elune can cleanse and heal and create harmony. In many wars and battles, the Sisters of Elune called upon their goddess for healing, inspiration, courage, and calm. The Tears of Elune, one of the pillars of creation, was left behind for the heroes of Azeroth to eventually use to help seal away the portal that allowed the forces of the Burning Legion to invade Azeroth. It was also used to communicate with Light's heart in the Legion storyline and lead us to the resurrection of Illidan Stormrage and Xera's destruction. Whoops. This is one of the indicators that suggests Elune is linked to the Titans, but there's one snag with that. Just who named the Tears of Elune the Tears of Elune? Just like real-world history, it's written by those who were alive, and it's interpreted by the later generations, usually the ones who control information. According to the Chronicles book, the first mention of the Pillars of Creation at all is by the Night Elves Asuramar, who discovered them along with other exotic antiquities. There's a chance that upon their discovery, the pillars had a name tag stamped on their sides, but it's more likely that the Highborn named the artifacts as accurately as they could based on their knowledge, which might not be 100% accurate. It's widely believed that Elune and the Titan Eonar share some sort of relationship, or they could be one and the same. Within the Antorus raid is Eonar's refuge in the Shrine of Ilaria, located in a place called Elunaria. This lends some credibility to Elune's relationship with Eonar, but it could also just be a red herring thrown at us by Blizzard. The wording Elunaria is present as early as Classic WoW with the Elunarian cloth set with no additional context. This just causes more confusion. Whether these two entities are the same or separate, there's just enough information to speculate that the Tears were named after Elune and not Eonar because Elune is just mainstream to Night Elven culture. Even in the earliest days of the Night Elves, when they were still referred to as Dark Trolls, they already worshipped the goddess Elune, which makes me wonder if the ancient trolls and Night Elves just made up the name Elune outright. Maybe during their communions, Elune just straight up says, "Hey peeps, you're on a continent named Kalandar, and by the way, I'm Elune. Hi." Also remember that the Tauren refer to Elune as Musha, or Musha. I'm never gonna get this. If the Tauren and Night Elves switch roles, Musha would be the dominant name used in this video. The goddess, the Tears, the sisters, sure. Depending on who dominated mainstream information at the time, it could have been the Tears of the Amani, the Zandalar, or the grilled cheese sandwich. There's power in a name until you can trace it back to its origins. I consider the association between Elune and the Titans reasonable speculation at best, but in my opinion, the lack of concrete references weakens the argument that Elune is a Titan or some echo of Eonar. According to Khadgar, ancient tomes suspect that Elune created the Prime Naru, including Zira, during the earliest days of the Great Dark Beyond. There are only a handful of witnesses who can confirm this though, as in only the Prime Naru, the Void Lords, and Elune. Literally nothing else existed at that point in time. So it's hard to explore this theory any further than to say, well, Khadgar said he read it in some book. Anyway, back to those early Night Elf days, they did in fact learn Titan words from Elune, such as the word Kalimdor. It's another Titan reference, but let's clarify. According to the Chronicles book, it wasn't the Titans that named the land Kalimdor, but the Titan Forged, the great constructs used to defeat the Black Empire of the Old Gods and subdue the Elementals. That tells us a few things. It backs up the claim that yes, Elune is super old, dating back to around the beginning of life on Azeroth. But it further weakens the claim that Elune is a Titan-like being. Otherwise, Elune would have been present for the events that took place at the time. It would have been identified as having played some role in the ordering of Azeroth, when the Titans reshaped the world to keep the elements in check, the Old Gods imprisoned, and so on. It could be that Elune is an accidental or intended product of Titan machinery, specifically the Forge of Wills or the Forge of Origination. These machines were designed to shape the will and fortify the world soul of Azeroth, but there's no record of Elune's presence or communing with the Titan Keepers. Either that or the Keepers looked down on Elune to where they just ignored it. It would be a big bummer if Elune turned out to be just a construct of a construct, especially because it wasn't dictated in the Chronicle. If not this though, we can speculate that Elune was observing everything that happened, either with or without being noticed by the Titan Pantheon. To further back up Elune's age, the Night Elves and Tauren claim that she and the great stag Malorn bore the demigod Cenarius. But again, this is a story that took place well before their civilizations existed and told over many generations. According to Chronicles, the Night Elves' claim is just a claim, a myth, just like the Tauren myths. Did a giant stag mate with a celestial body? Probably not literally, but it would be more palatable to imagine the essences of Elune and Malorn finding kinship, then fuse their essences to bear Cenarius because both Malorn and Elune share a love for life. Now there is no mention of Elune, speculation or otherwise, at all before the ordering of Azeroth, which predates the recorded history of civilization. That doesn't mean that Elune didn't exist during this time, just that it didn't have a name or record of activity. So to find Elune's origins, we have to go further back. During the days of the Black Empire, before the arrival of the Titans, the Old Gods ruled. They enslaved the four elemental lords of earth, fire, wind, and water, and spread death throughout the land that had yet to be named Kalimdor. There's no obvious evidence of Elune's presence here, so let's go back even further. Before the Old Gods, the elements went unchecked. Earth, fire, wind, and water fought one another in endless conflict, warping and shaping the planet with pure destruction for millennia. Azeroth was in turmoil, unlike a more stable planet like Draenor. According to Chronicles Volume 2, Draenor's elementals worked in tandem because of a fifth element, spirit, that created balance and harmony among the elements there. It's spirit that soothes the otherwise erratic tendencies of the elements and lets them be at peace. On Azeroth, though, that element was very sparse. That's because the world soul of Azeroth apparently consumed most of it in its earliest days for reasons we haven't learned yet. Maybe it's for nourishment, maybe not, but it's the lack of spirit element that caused the other four elements to run amok. We know that spirit has a lot to do with the ability to connect with the elements. That's why it's such a big thing for shaman. And spirit is everywhere, within all beings. There's not enough of it to coalesce into an elemental lord of its own, or maybe it just doesn't work that way. But we know very little about its relationship with Azeroth. If the world soul was consuming it, why isn't the spirit element completely gone? Is it because the world soul consumed most of it? Is it full? Did the world soul and spirit element develop some sort of relationship where the element will sort of, feed Azeroth in exchange for it to not be totally devoured? It's hard to say because while we know that a destroyed elemental eventually returns, a consumed element might be treated totally differently. We just don't have a solid grasp of how the elements work in relation to a world soul. Now, if you haven't already, put your tinfoil hats on. You're about to be blown away and disappointed at the same time. If you haven't guessed already, based on everything we've learned, I think that Elune is what is left of the fifth element of spirit. Boom. So here's my theory, my version of Elune's history on Azeroth. Once upon a time, when the world soul of Azeroth was very young, it consumed the element of spirit at an alarming rate. In order to avoid being completely devoured, it sort of escaped somehow, all the way to one of Azeroth's moons, or it might have became one of Azeroth's moons, avoiding the reach of the Hungarian world soul. Over time, a relationship was built between it and Azeroth because that's what the element of spirit does, create harmony, partnership. It still had a natural affinity and responsibility to help keep the elements in check, which given its condition, it was doing a pretty bad job at, as well as keep Azeroth's world soul nourished. So this element of spirit is literally like a slow feeding tube for Azeroth because it's such a hungry baby. We can simplify this a little bit and say that the spirits didn't want to get gobbled up and just escape to the moon, where they try to keep the world in order as best as it can. This all just depends on what it means for the world soul to consume the spirit element, but in either version, the element of spirit just hangs in orbit. Cut to the arrival of the old gods. Fortunately, none of the old gods crashed into the moon where the spirit element resided. The other elements were enslaved, but the old gods couldn't reach the moon. Maybe the spirit element tried to help out, maybe not. Pure speculation here, but this could be where Zera or the Prime Naru interacts with the element of spirit. Hence the reading, albeit the flawed reading, that Khadgar found. The spirits could have called out to the Great Dark, and these agents of the light steered the Titan Agrimar in this direction, to kickstart the Titan's intervention without their direct involvement, but I'm really just throwing that thought out there. By the time the Titans come and go, most of the bulk of the four elements are banished to their respective elemental plane. Deepholm, Skywall, the Abyssal Maw, and the Firelands. And of course there's that big hole in Azeroth's celestial body. We can presume that the spirit element is unable to heal the wound or otherwise close the Well of Eternity, but it can help support the efforts of the Keepers and the beginning of life on Azeroth. With most of the chaotic elements sealed away, the element of spirit now has no problems doing its good work with calming the remaining element on Azeroth, and finally, bringing balance. It's possible that the Titans noticed this relationship between Azeroth and its moon and decided to leave it be. After all, they had a lot of other work to do with ordering the world and keeping it safe from the threat of the old gods. The natural order of the elements and its relationship with the world soul may have been something they didn't want to disturb any further. This can explain why the element of spirit was ignored during the early accounts of Azeroth's history. It already had its act together. So as life began by the hands of the Keepers, the element of spirit noticed one of these first living beings in Malorn. It could be that one thing leads to another, and they create a life together in the form of Cenarius. A lot of time passes, the Troll Empire rises, the Dark Trolls settle near the Well of Eternity to bask in its vast arcane power, and come to notice this concentration of the element of spirit in the form of the moon above. This helps back the theory that the spirit element is in fact being fed into Azeroth, and what better place to deposit it but its open wound. But it's here that, at the shores of the Well of Eternity, a font of arcane power, and the blessing of spirit from the moon above, it affects the Dark Trolls physically and spiritually. Now an entire race is trying to communicate with the element of spirit, and it's given a name, Elune. I think we might be onto something here. Elune is a powerful force that doesn't make outward appearances like the Elemental Lords, and it's closely aligned with the Night Elf and Tauren cultures as well as those who commune with the elements. It can cleanse the corruption of Ysera, but it's not all-powerful, like it's not a giant moon laser that fires off into Argus, and it's not going to make me a sandwich. But it doesn't feel like such an exciting revelation, does it? A lot of the speculation is that Elune is a secret badass, and Blizzard is waiting for the right time to unleash lunar fury upon the unsuspecting next big bad. Elune may simply be the hardest working element in the office, doing more with less. Maybe it is just a battery for Azeroth, and a check on the elements, and a conduit for the mortal races to commune with them. All the while it answers the few prayers from a select few who ask really, really nicely. Or I'm horribly wrong. So that's another one of my crazy but plausible theories, and if you're feeling disappointed, well, I told you might be. I'd love to see some discussion on this theory, so feel free to slap me around and debate this topic because I think it's pretty interesting. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in other less mainstream theories, please support the channel with a like, share, or you can be one of my fantastic patrons, all so I can give you more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.